So all you guys, and all you folks, you're doing it wrong. Those guys, they figured it out with beanbags. So yeah, I hate backlogs. They're in the way, nothing more than friction in your development. They just suck. Yeah, anyone with me on that? So the main problem with backlogs is that it's way too easy to add stuff to it. There's no bar, you have to be this tall to add shit to this backlog. You should have. But they just keep growing and require constant care and pruning. It's like if you have a little flower bed, you have to weed out the stuff you don't want to keep it at a reasonable level. And we all, in theory, knows how this is supposed to work. We start a project, we make a little list of tasks, a backlog, if you will. And we start working, and over time, you complete some tasks. And you keep doing this until you get to the end, and you're done. I've done everything I was supposed to do. Except it doesn't work like that. Because as you go along, you get more stuff. You're like, oh, that works like that. Oh. And then some other person comes in and is like, hey, could we do something? Oh, so-and-so. We like to refer to ourselves as architects and builders, and we like to use terms that match the physical world. The difference between building bridges and building software is that nobody sees a bridge and goes, I bet we can land airplanes on that. But in software we do, just things keep adding up and your backlogs get longer and longer and longer. And then you don't have a backlog, but you have a backlog problem. There is one good thing about a long backlog. There's one single good thing. It means somebody cares. It means somebody cares about your product and you work in an organization where ideas and opportunities worth exploring are being created. That is the only thing, in my opinion, that is good with a backlog. That's where it ends. Apart from that, it's just a bunch of hassle. So you need to do, when the backlog goes longer, you need to take care of it. Who has backlog grooming meetings? A couple. It sounds really dirty. Yeah, I'm going to groom my backlog tonight. If you say it with a deep voice, it sounds even worse. I'm in a grooming meeting this morning. It doesn't work. But you have to have regular meetings to figure out what should be moved around in the backlog, what goes in, what goes out, this thing here, should this move up, should this move down, should we delete this or not? What is the most important things? Make sure that everything is in the right order. This takes time. Backlog items age like fine milk. They're perishable. They are not suitable for sitting on a shelf sprint after sprint after sprint. They rot. One solution that people have is they create multiple backlogs. We'll have a backlog, and this backlog is full. Let's make a new one. And the question is no longer how many items do you have on your backlog. The question is how many backlogs do you have? I talked to one person. They were on backlog number 12. That's an odd way of solving the problem, but okay. Whatever floats your goat. Then you have other that have various backlogs for various things. They have the long-term backlog, and then they have the in the immediate future backlog, and then they have the next sprint backlog, and then they have the right now backlog, which sounds, well, that sounds reasonable, and then you realize the amount of work you have to do to migrate stuff between these. There's a size difference problem, because on a backlog you often have create massive new feature next to fix spelling error, typo on front page. So there's these things that seem or lent the same importance, which they don't really have. And you have lots of small tasks being piled into like minor improvements, epic. Which kind of hides a lot of complexity and a lot of stuff and completely unrelated things. And like, yeah, I'm going to work on this thing. I have no idea what's in here, this bag, this Pandora's task item, but I'll just open it and find what I can find. And you risk analysis paralysis, where there's so much stuff to figure out. It's so large, and you're like, I don't even know where to go from here. Like you look at it and it's like, that one's important, I guess. We'll move that to the top. And a larger and larger portion of your time is spent maintaining your backlog rather than delivering actual value to the customer, which is kind of the point, isn't it? Sorry about that. Delivering value to the customer, that's what we do. So the more backlog items you have, the more stuff, more problems you have. And there's 4 or 3 effects that kick in when you have lots of stuff on your backlog. One is the recency bias. Anyone heard of that, the recency bias? It's a universal bias, but it applies to the backlog. It means that we place more importance on recent things than older things. So new items on the backlog get unfairly prioritized because it's new, and unconsciously you place a larger importance on that than something that was old because this is the new thing. New must be good, right? You have the sunk cost fallacy, where the more effort you put into something, the more important it becomes for you to finish it. The harder it becomes for you to just go, nah, screw it. Take it away. I'm done with this. So we invest the time and effort into tasks in the backlog, and we're less willing to get rid of them because, well, we spent so much time and money on these, we might as well complete it. And there's the IKEA effect. Anyone heard of that IKEA effect? The IKEA effect is why you like your IKEA furniture, because you have made an effort in building it. You have invested time in putting something together, and you like that thing better than something that you just bought complete of similar quality and price. Because you've poured some of your soul into this thing, and then I like it. So the backlog items that you've created, you're going to like those better than the ones he created. Not because you're just someone else. These factors lead to skewed prioritization. So your backlog doesn't represent what is really important for the company. They more represent what's important for you right now, if you're the pruner. As an industry, we've been told to create user stories. Anyone create user stories? As I want, so that kind of thing, yeah? 2 people do that still. I've been told that user stories are a placeholder for a conversation. It's like, we'll create this thing. As a developer, I want to, so that thing. So we put it on there, and we wait to have this conversation. And when the backlog items come up to the top of the backlog item, top of the pile, and we're ready to plan a new sprint or whatever, we're ready to look at this, oh, here's a placeholder for conversation. I need to pick this up. We need to talk about this. And you're ready to have this conversation about this item, but it turns out the people who created the item, they're no longer in your project. Or the person that created the item is like, ooh, did I write that? When was this? Last year? Wow. Or, yeah, this feature that it's talking about, we no longer have that feature. We moved on. So you lose the context of this. This is your items aging like fine milk. Who created? Who identified the need? Does the need still exist? Do we need it yet? Are those people at all involved in the backlog grooming anymore? Maintaining that context over time requires effort and has a cost. This whole thing becomes demotivating. It doesn't feel very rewarding to add new items to a backlog that is already piled high with others' tasks. You see this huge stack of stuff to do. It's hard to see, why should I put my stuff into that pile? When is that going to get done? What are the chances even going to get a proper evaluation? And we're just like, no, we can't do that. We have this other stuff that I created because I like that better than your stuff. People who have a stake in your project might find it difficult to locate their things, their theme, whatever they're looking for in your backlog. unless it's really well organized, really well, you spend a lot of time categorizing and sorting it, which again, time. And you also never really finish it. Has anyone ever completed their backlog? I did a calculation of our backlog. Like, okay, a task will take average 2 to 3 days to finish. The team we have, if we stopped adding stuff to the backlog and we're not going to add anything else, it would take us 2 years to finish it. No new features in the backlog, just do what we said we wanted to do, 2 years. And there's nothing really to celebrate, because you never finish anything. It's like, yeah, we've finished the top 5 items. Now we can take the next top 5 items out of 147. Yay. When you have a long list of tasks, and you don't really finish anything, you don't work on you risk creating what's called a checkbox culture, where those deeply involved in the work, it becomes more important to check the boxes and get stuff away from the backlog than it is to actually think about exploring concepts and exploring the problem space and figuring out more shit. Because now we had these items we need to finish. We need to move these cards on this Kanban board because we're not doing Scrum. We're better than that. We're doing Kanban, right? So we need to move these things, and we need to keep the most important stuff in our to-do list. But there's stuff there, and we have work limits and stuff like that. The sheer volume of the work can make it look like there's no room for new ideas at all. And it gives you this sense of control, which is totally false, making you feel like you know what needs to be done because you have a list. But without regular pruning, there's no guarantee that what you're planning to build is what you actually need. Because you planned these things 6 months ago when they were way further down on the list. They just came up. It also encourages early optimization, because you look at in the backlog, it's like, oh, I'm going to do this thing, and I see further down here, there's another couple of things. So I'm going to put in some extra work up here to prepare for these other things down here, which may or may not be important. But you see them in the backlog and the list of things to do, and it gives you this false sense of security. It's like, yes, I'm future-proofing my work. I know what needs to be done. And some of you here in the audience are probably thinking, wow, that's a really dysfunctional way to manage a backlog. Yes. And I argue that you have a team that is great at doing this. You manage a backlog. You don't have all of these problems. And I'd argue that you're not doing well because of the backlog. You're doing well despite it. So even if you're doing well right now, you could be doing better. We struggle with almost all of this. So who are we? Well, I'm Glenn. I work in Norway at a small low-tech startup. We're building a product that lets you get your legal affairs in order. You go on and put in your wills and stuff like that. I lead the technical side. We're a small team, 15 people in the company total. 3 or 4 lawyers, a couple of designers, 6 developers. We used to be running a Kanban process. Anyone here use Kanban? Yeah, you have your Kanban boards with your process, and you evaluate, and you refine your process, and go on. Works great. Used to look like this. Had a backlog, kept growing, and growing, and growing. It was hard for us to figure out what to tackle first. The challenges, differentiating things, small things, big things, large initiatives, smaller fixes. Spent more and more time just pruning this, making sure that what came in, it was totally random when people created issues. Did they end up on top or on bottom? Never knew. Depending on which button they clicked. Task deletion, we just deleted a bunch of stuff. It was like, yeah, well, guess we're never getting that, just remove it. Well, who created it? Well, I don't know. Sucks to be them, I guess. Then a former colleague of us introduced us to a process called Shape Up. Shape Up is a methodology created out of a company called, it used to be called Basecamp, now it's 37 Signals. It's a different way of managing your work. So I'm going to do a little bit of information about how Shape Up works. And then I'm going to talk about how it worked for us. We started doing this in 2021, near the end, so we're coming up on 3 years. There's 5 key aspects of Shape Up. You have fixed cycles. They call it cycles, but it's almost the same as a sprint. It's a time box period of time. It is fixed. There's no backlog. You don't have a backlog. We do what's something called shaping the work before we start working on it. I'll get into the details of all of this. We work with small, empowered teams that are empowered to implement these small mini projects that we have. And we don't estimate, but we have an appetite. I'll get to all of this. 6 weeks cycle is the thing in Shape Up. 6 weeks has been selected because it is long enough to deliver something meaningful, and is short enough to get a little bit of time pressure and a deadline going. The constraint create a focus, as opposed to, here's a thing that is sort of vaguely defined, let us know when you're done. But it's not the, these days, shorter sprints of Scrum. Anyone do Scrum with sprints? Anyone do 1 week sprints? Anyone do 2 week sprints? 3 weeks? 4 weeks? Yeah. Most people do around 2 weeks. They find that is hectic enough for them to keep going. We're like 6 weeks, really? Seems long. We learned to love it. It actually is great. It actually gives you the opportunity to deliver something meaningful instead of just checking a bunch of boxes on a small task item. It ensures that each cycle delivers tangible value. We like to talk about value. What is the point of this? What is the value to the customer of this? It allows the team to concentrate on producing results that matter without getting lost in details or drawn into other endless development loops that take a real long time. It does away with the traditional backlog. Projects are shaped, I'll get into details of that, before each cycle begins. There's a specification going on. So we specify what's the work to be done, sort of loosely. And we have a bunch of suggestions. And some of these go into the cycle, some do not. The ones that do not are discarded. We delete them. I'll get back to how that works in practice. The concept of shaping is central to Shape Up. It's sort of in the name. It is a significant reason why this methodology works, in my opinion. It involves thoroughly defining and refining an idea before it reaches the development team to a point. This process makes sure that only viable and well-formed and thought about ideas enter development with some clear boundaries and some clear objectives. This is what we want to achieve. This is the problem we're solving. If you master this shaping process, I think is a game changer. Conversely, if you struggle with shaping, you're going to have a bad time. The whole thing more or less falls apart. Without proper shaping, you risk pushing unclear, poorly thought out projects onto development. You're going to have confusion, you're going to have scope creep, ultimately, you're going to have failure to deliver anything meaningful to your customers. I think the success of Shape Up hinges on getting this part of the process right. So you start with an idea. The idea is raw and it needs to be shaped. You have an idea, it's like, we should have so-and-so. We need this. The shaping process is typically done by a senior group, a small group, that works in parallel with the cycle team. And the challenge here is to define this job at the right level of abstraction. You need to outline the boundaries of the solution but not dictate the specific task and details. That is up to the team to determine. So you're focused on the customer side of it. Get the right balance, providing enough structure and enough guide to the team while leaving some creative freedom for the team. How to implement it within those boundaries. And it empowers the team to think about how do we solve problems? How do we do things here? It empowers them to be innovative and think about better ways of working instead of giving them a bucket list of things to fix. Like, do this, do this, do this. Instead, here's a problem space, work within that. We find that we get better results from our developers doing it this way. We get better ideas, we get more creative work, and we are more productive. We call shaping this idea into a pitch. Pitch is a more formalized version of this idea, describes the idea's reason for existence and some possible solution. So we need to define the problem. What is the problem we're trying to solve? And we try to keep every single problem customer focused. We use a fixed template for our pitches. This is the first question. What is the problem? What is the problem you're aiming to solve? Who has this problem? How is it affecting our users? Is it a customer problem? All work should be rooted in a customer problem. Anyone ever made, like, when you're doing user stories, like, as a developer, I would like something. I would like to have unit tests so that I know my application works. To get that approved spend some time on writing unit tests or something like that. I'm a strong believer in the fact that every single work you do should be rooted in a customer problem. If you can't trace it back to a customer problem, you probably shouldn't do it. Describe what things look like today and why it doesn't work today. Why is this a problem? Thinking about the current solutions to this problem, if there are any at all, and why they're not addressing this problem, will help you define possible solutions later. And then you have to figure out, why is it important to solve? Why is this problem important for us as a company to solve? And not only why is it important to solve, but why is it important to solve right now? Sure, there's lots of important problems, but not all of them are important right now. Is there an opportunity in the market that opened up and like, hey, if we do something, grab that thing? Are you losing money every day because of this problem? Are customers leaving your site at a point in your sales funnel and you're bleeding money, basically? You're leaving money on the table and walking away from it? Are customers complaining about a thing and satisfaction is going down? Are bugs going up? Can you point to something that says this problem is important to solve right now because so-and-so? If you can't explain to someone why it's important right now, maybe it's not even important. But especially it helps when you need to prioritize between different things, like, yeah, this is important right now because so-and-so, and this is important right now because so-and-so, and this one, it's kind of just important. And then we need a solution outline. Solution outlines come in many shapes and forms, from the totally abstract to the concrete. How many create wireframes before development? Like prototypings and stuff like that, yeah. It's important to get the right level of abstraction. There is a scale here, but all of these examples here are wrong. They're too concrete. They're too specific. Wireframes are too concrete. They anchor the solution way too early. Because you're not focusing on the problem, but you start focusing on the implementation. So you want to talk about how to solve the problem from the consumer side, the customer side, but you don't want to go way into the details and lock down a solution. You want that to be open for exploration when you start working on it. Words alone are too vague and too abstract. Using words to describe a solution is saying that I have these thoughts in my head, and I should be able to type those thoughts down so that the words exactly represent my thoughts, so that when you read my words, you will get the exact same thoughts and images in your head, which never happens. So we need some visuals along with the words usually. And in Shape Up, we do what's called fat marker sketches. Super simple sketches, literally drawn with a fat marker, that removes the ability to go into details. You cannot draw fine lines and tiny little boxes and stuff like that. Let's do a real example. So on our platform, you log on and you can create your will, last will and testament. You can say, when I die, I want my estate to go to so-and-so person. Then we had a requirement coming in, a feature that we wanted that you could name what's called a secondary heir. I want my stuff to go to this person. Renee here gets all my stuff. But if he's suddenly dies in a freak weightlifting accident with his wife, then I want Adele to take over my inheritance in his place. I want to specify a secondary heir if he dies before me. So we start with a fat marker sort of sketch like this. Like we have a secondary heir heading. We have some options. You can follow the law. You can return the values to the state. You can choose an heir. If you pick that, we go over here, and then we choose one. You can select the sixth thing, add a new one, set a percentage. That's what we started with. That's the initial idea. It's like, okay, let's work with that. And we use either an online iPad kind of thing and just run that, or we use a whiteboard and just take a picture of it. And we use very broad strokes, easy to manipulate, easy to change. How's this kind of supposed to look? Evolves into this. Change some of the text. What if something happens? What if happens if someone dies before you? Some options, select heir, an add button, choose secondary heir. Here, from the first stage to this stage, we change a little bit. You can add a person, organization, some drop downs. We removed the percentage part because that turned out to be confusing. We thought that would be confusing. And that's it. That is the task given to developers and designers. And they know how to work with this. They know how to put this into our design system, put this into our apps, the way things are supposed to look. And this is what it ended up looking like. Secondary inheritance. Here you can decide what happens if an heir dies before the values after you are supposed to be distributed. Choose what's right for you. Follow this. Return the end. I want to name them myself. Click that. Go there. Add one and stuff like that. So now you have a rough understanding in your solution outline, and it is an outline. What you want to have built, you have formulated why it's important and why it's important right now. Next part, how can we tell if it's a success? In my opinion, a task isn't really done when it's in production. It is done when we see value from it. So what is the success criteria for a feature? Is it feature was released? Feature is used by X amount of people. Feature is used by so-and-so many % of our users or customers. Feature brings in so-and-so much revenue. Revenue sales increased by so-and-so. User conversion increased to so-and-so. Bugs are now fewer. We think it's important when you're setting up a task to, when you're defining the task, also define what does success look like. Defining early on what success looks like helps you prioritize, and it helps you to learn from your releases. And I'll get back to the learning part as well. But you want to get this in early and says, why are we making this? We're making this so that sales will increase. And then we know that, okay, we have to measure sales then. And we have to keep track of that. And we have this feature, and this is part of product management. We make something, we release it. Did it give the desired effect? If not, we need to change things. We talk about rabbit holes. Rabbit holes are bad because they are holes in the ground that is hard to see, and if you or your horse, everybody has a horse here, don't they? Right? Yeah. We're civilized people. We have horses, of course. But if you walk across the field and you step in a rabbit hole, you might break your leg even. So it's the kind of things that problems that we can anticipate. Are there any rabbit holes here? Like, let's check this field out before you walk into it and start building stuff on it. Are there any problems that we can anticipate that the team should try to avoid? Can we mitigate these risks beforehand? Think about the scenario we've outlined. Any assumptions here we haven't defined? We assume this thing will work. Do we need to do something technically that we've never done before? Are we doing new stuff? Get a technical review on your pitch. Are there any technical problems that might appear? Are we talking to a third-party service? Do we understand that? Have we used it before? Get those into the light as early as possible and discuss these as early as possible, because it would also help you prioritize things. And also, as important as defining what we'll do is defining what we will not do. So here's your problem. This thing over here, not your problem. That's what we tell the team. You work on this thing here, don't touch it. So we might have tasks that we're going to do so-and-so, and we will define out of bounds interfacing with third-party service. We're just going to ignore that part for now. Or we have a problem that is easily, you could build upon it, but we'll specifically say we will not do these things right now. We're going to do this thing. This thing is a logical continuation of that, but we explicitly say we're not going to do that. We're going to do this thing first. We're going to get it out in the field. We're going to learn from that, and then we'll see if we'll do the other thing. Identify your nice-to-haves. It's like, do we need this thing to deliver value? If not, no, we're not going to do it. And never, ever, if you're in the business side of things, are you talking to developers? Never ask this question. And if you're a developer, never answer this question. And the question is it possible? Yes, it always is. Everything is possible given sufficient time and monkeys. If you have an unlimited supply of monkeys, one of them will write Shakespeare's works. If you have an unlimited supply of developers, everything is possible. Sure. If you have enough time, everything is possible. Instead, ask, can we get this done in so-and-so many weeks? Then the answer is more like, ooh. And what's the answer to everything in IT? It depends. Depends on what? Oh, so-and-so. Great, get that into the pitch. But if someone comes and asks you, is it possible? You go, I'm going to stop you right there. It is, yes, and we're not going to do that. Estimates. Anybody do estimates? Anybody estimate stuff? Show of hands. Anybody doing no estimates? Like, we don't estimate, yeah. The ones doing no estimates, do you size your things into similar sizes so that everything's the same size, so you get a continuous flow in their Kanban? No. A lot of people like estimating. How many has estimate not based on size, but based on amount of work, like hours? Not today, but ever. Yeah. How many estimate by story points ever? How many had a program manager that had a formula for converting story points into hours? Yeah, that's a 5 story point. Oh, you mean 2.5 days? Well, no, I said 5 story points. It's a relative size compared to a 3 and a 7. It's more than a 3, it's less than a 7. Yes, 2.5 days. No, that's not what I said. That's what I heard. Estimating takes time. That's why some people don't do it. It's like waste of time. Estimation is at best a guesswork. Most likely it's a lie. You lie to yourself most of the time. It's like, yeah, this is going to take me 4 days tops. Sure. Say to yourself in the mirror, that's going to take me 4 days. I can visualize it. 4 weeks later, it's like almost done. Just a little bit left here. Estimation takes time. It's usually wasted because it's guesswork at best. The thing is, when we're making stuff in software, by definition, the stuff we're making has never been made before. Because if it had been made before, you would have just copied that. And if it's made before, you don't know the people who did it, so there's no value to you. So you have no idea. You can guess at best. Instead of estimating, in Shape Up, we talk about appetite. How much appetite do you have for a task? How much do we want this idea? How much time, and which is money, are we willing to invest to spend on this idea or this pitch? Is it worth spending an entire cycle on it? Can we take it on if we fix it in a simpler way? Can we say, well, this thing here, we have an appetite of 2 weeks for this. I am willing to give you 2 weeks to look at this problem. And then lots of developers are like, oh, but how can management decide how long I'm going to take on a task? That's not what they're doing. They're saying you have 2 weeks to spend. Let's see what you can get done in 2 weeks. That is entirely different than finish this in 2 weeks. We fix time and keep a variable scope. And the clue here is everybody understands this. Everybody understands that if you fix the time, you need to vary scope. I talked to Woody here the other day, who said he had a thing used earlier that you had 3 things. You know the old good, fast, cheap, pick any 2? He had a conversation with his project managers or his business people and said, okay, you have money, scope, or people, scope, and time. And he told his business person, you can decide 2 of those. I'll get the last one. Which ones do you want? It's kind of the same thing, except we're all in agreement. The business can decide how much money we're going to put on this thing. It's worth 2 weeks of work for us. It's worth 4 weeks of work, 6 weeks of work. And then we'll see what you can get done in those weeks. And the amount of time we set will lead to different solutions. Anybody here ever make dinner? Like cook food? The rest of you just buy out and get Renee to do it. So I have kids, a few. And sometimes I'll cook dinner, coming home from work, and they're off to football practice or handball practice, whatever they're doing. And I have an hour. And I need to cook them dinner and get them fed within that hour. And sometimes I'll make Sunday dinners, which I'll start at noon and finish at 6. And those 2 dinners are completely different. They might be both good dinners, healthy dinners, but they are very different dinners. So how much time you allocate to something affects the kind of solution you go for. Look at our timeline, we aim to hit the 6-week mark. That is the sweet spot, I believe. That is the point where you get something meaningful done. This thing, let's should be able to do this in 6 weeks. So you need someone to look at your pitch and say, yeah, what you outlined here, we should be able to do something meaningful in 6 weeks. That's the estimation you're going to do. Or 2 weeks or 4 weeks. You do not want to go over 6 weeks. That leads to bad things. So this is our sweet spot. We don't want things to drag on. They should be sufficient to deliver something meaningful. Your pitch should take this into consideration. Do not describe something huge and out so large a scope that it becomes impossible to do anything useful in 6 weeks. So when you're done a pitch, it is rough. It's obviously unfinished. As a developer and an art designer, you can see what goes where. I see the gaps in your solution proposal, but that's cool. I'm an adult. I'm professional. I can fill these gaps. Too much detail too early, And you risk people committing to the wrong things because someone didn't really look at the problem physically, but they still decided how you're going to do it. But even though it's rough, it is solved. It is well thought out. You consider what could go wrong. You know what the value is. You know the rabbit holes. You know what's out of scope. You know what's in scope. You've set the boundaries. So the problem is understood. Not the implementation, but the problem. And it's bounded. It specifies what to do and what not to do. The work is limited in time. Now, who shapes? I said earlier that the shaping is often done by a senior team. They have an idea of what they want out of the project, out of the product we're making. They talk to customers, they get a feel for demand. So the senior team or product manager or product designer often has a big role to play here. But in reality, a pitch can come from anyone in the company. Anyone can create a pitch. In our company, a developer creates a pitch, designer creates a pitch, a lawyer creates a pitch. It's just an idea. But we need those questions. What is the problem we're trying to solve? Why is it important? And why is it important right now? And what are the basic outlines of a solution, just to get in the right direction? Anyone can do that in the organization. It is a creative activity. It requires some technical understanding, knowing what's possible and not, and how it fits into that. But that you can get help from someone technical. Hey, can you look over my pitch? Sure. It is strategic work. What are we trying to achieve as a company? Does it fit into long-term plans? Not a lot of people can fit all those things in their head and understand all these things, so shaping is often done as a collaborative effort. And then we place our bets. Before each 6-week cycle, we have what's called a betting table, where all the pitches that have come in are evaluated, they're presented, they've gone through, and some of them graduate to a bet. And I like the word bet. I think it's significant. So we're staking time and money, putting that into the table, into our chips of time and money, and saying, I'm betting that this pitch here will give me a return. It'll give me value back. It's worth the time and money. I don't know. I have a guess, I think. I have a gut feeling. Maybe I have some evidence that if we do this, then so and so. But it's still a bet. It's a risk. We have minimized the risk as well as we can, but it is a bet. I'm betting on this thing being good. The pitches that do not graduate to bets are deleted. We don't keep them laying around in a common area to build a backlog. If someone wants to keep the bets, they can on their own space and their own time. So if someone made a pitch and it didn't make it, and there's like, I still think it's a really good idea, they're going to keep it in a personal area, and they're going to keep it and maybe reintroduce it the next time, or maybe sometime later. But we don't have a central repository where everyone has their old pitches. It's up to you, and keep your own stuff. And you decide if it's important for you. You have the context of the thing you created. You know why you're created, hopefully. And you know, like, yeah, this thing, that doesn't really matter. We never need this anyway. I'll remove it, and nobody cares. But we don't spend a whole bunch of company time pruning a list of old bets. And then there's a question. You don't have to choose between a cumbersome backlog or never remembering anything at all. There are different parts of the organization that keep track of stuff that's important to them in the way that works best for them. So in our organization, we, as developers, we have a list with what we call like minor work. In Norwegian, we call it chaps. It's like shit that just gets done sometime, like annoyances. And I'll tell you when we pick those up. But it's never a backlog. It's like 10 items at the most, like just minor. We discovered this thing, let's just put it on a shelf and we'll pick it up in a specific phase that I'll get to. Our lawyers have a little list of small improvements that they want to get done. And every now and again, they'll talk to the developer and just get it done, solved. I'll talk about when as well. But it's not like we're an organization with dementia, like everything, oh, what happened last week? I don't know. Oh, new pitches, great. Have I seen this before? I don't think so. Like, we remember things, we keep track of stuff that is like really important, but we do it on a much more personal level of people keep track of what's important to them. We don't stuff things into an unpersonal backlog and ask someone else to keep track of it. And then we do the work. The project, the idea, the pitch, the bet is handed over to the team who will do the work, they will execute it, and the team should consist of the people necessary to implement this and put it into life. Ideally, it should include at least one designer and 1 or 2 developers. Together, they will look at the problem, they will figure out a good way to solve it, they'll design it, they'll implement it. The team is self-directed, they solve the problem in the way that they see fit. They're not giving a checklist of tasks, but they're giving a problem space and a rough solution proposal, some boundaries, but within those constraints, they're free to work. One of the first things they do is slice the problem. Break down the project in minor milestones. We call this slicing. This is important, and it's important to make sure that each slice can be completed and be potentially deliverable on its own. So we'll take these slices and finish them. They might have an order, but that's fine. But when I complete a slice, that thing should be able to be pushed to production somehow. Could be feature flagged. It could be a thing that is half a solution, but they're still able to do what they want, something. Remember, we have an appetite. If we run out of appetite, if we slice it this way, we should still have something being able to be deployed. We don't like, oh, we're done and everything is in shambles. There's nothing to be done. Everything is a waste. We should have something deliverable the whole time. Finish one slice at a time. Applications have different parts. For instance, you have front end and back end very often. You should work in slices across these that are coherent across the different parts, so that when you finish a slice, it is finished in all the different parts of the application. So you don't have, we have this thing and the front end is all done. We have no back end for it. So that's nothing. You have nothing. Yeah, with a full front end, that doesn't work. You have nothing. Traditionally, we do design first, and then design takes their design and it gives them to developers and explains it. Often involves some person standing in front of a screen and pointing at it. We don't do that. We don't like that. We like working as a team. We follow the methodology with the technical name hot potato, where the work goes between developer and designers like a hot potato. It's like, ooh, let's work on this. Take it back. Ooh, back and forth. This works really well with Shape Up, and you have a team consisting of developers and designers. You start with some design work. Maybe the developers are in on it to understand what's going on. Maybe they have some foundational stuff that they need to do first. Then they have a chat, and here's a rough outline of what we're doing. Great. We'll start implementing that. Designer goes into more detail. Developers come back. Okay, we got the rough outline you had. Got some changes here. And we keep working back and forth like this. Small, minor increments. Sure, sometimes we change things like, actually, we're going to change things. That's great. We have a pretty good code base, so we're able to change things pretty effectively. This approach requires that design and development work closer together, either physically or virtually. That works as well, but you have to work close together. You cannot have designers over there, and I'll let you developers know when I'm done. And then we have the cutoff. Appetite is used. Well, you just stop. Didn't finish? Okay, hopefully you sliced it well. What you do not do is like, just a couple of more days. Because what you're doing then is you're deciding way down the line, this thing is actually more important than that other thing. And you're deciding unilaterally on your own. Don't do that. The appetite is spent. Great, I got a new thing coming. Do that. That can be tough. That can be tough. Stop working on something where you still have, just a little bit, just a couple of days more, just a couple of weeks. Did I say weeks? I meant days. Sorry. Freudian slip there. Cutting scope doesn't mean cutting quality. Never cut quality. Quality is the baseline of what we're doing. We cannot do this process. You cannot have an agile methodology, which this is, if you don't have an agile code base, which requires quality. That's a requirement to get this to work. So we have this cycle. We pitch something, we develop it, we test it, little loop there, development test, we launch it, and then we learn from it. And we look at the experience of having this in production, we learn, this can happen along the cycle as well if we just deploy features as they go along. We take in learning, and based on what we learn, we'll decide, do we want to develop more in the next cycle? Do we want to continue in this project? Do we want to continue this idea, develop more of it? Or should we just leave it? The cycle goes anew. But 6-week cycles back to back, that's going to be grueling. So we introduced something called a cooldown. So after each 6-week cycle, we have a 2-week cooldown period. The cooldown period is where the developers and designers decide themselves what they want to work on. They want to clear up some technical debt. They want to experiment with some feature. They're recruited by one of our lawyers to say, hey, I have this list of little bugs and annoyances. Could we sit down and work on that? And go, sure, let's do that for a couple of weeks. All the stuff, all the minor stuff that doesn't really fit into a 6-week pitch or 2 weeks, 4-week pitch, we solve those in the cooldown cycles. It is very much bottom-up driven. The developers and designers themselves decide what they want to work on. And we get some good results on that. The code base we're on now, I think it has the lowest amount of technical debt I've ever worked with. Because we don't suffer it. It's like, this thing annoys us. I'm going to fix this in the next cooldown. And we do. Oh, we want to change this technical thing. We want to change our messaging, our eventing platform. Because this one we have, it doesn't vibe for us. We want this one other one instead. Great, we'll do that in the next cooldown, and we did. This thing here this abstraction really leaks. Great, we'll fix it. Our lawyer comes, hey, there's a bunch of stuff in the will that makes it harder for us to do our jobs, and we get a lot of support calls for this. Great, let's sit down and just fix these things. We'll do it. We've had experience where people say, hey, I'm going to make a risk evaluation engine that will, all the forms that people submit, that will go through and evaluate risk if they've done something weird in the forms, so that our caseworkers get a little bar saying, hey, this one has no weird stuff in it, this one's had a lot of weird stuff in it, you want to read this closely. A huge boon came out of a 2-week cooldown because one developer just had an idea and decided to go with it. It's great, love it. That's Shape Up. That's some of the things that we've been doing in Shape Up. We've been doing it for almost 3 years. We liked the 6-week. It was a bit weird in the beginning, but yeah, I like it. I really like it. One of the things we found really useful was to have a high-level roadmap. What are the strategic initiatives that we're going to do for the past 6 to 12 months? Very high level. You can see here from all the way on the left, there's a bunch of stuff going on, and it gets thinner and thinner as you go out, which is by design. But having that, in the beginning we didn't have this, which was a lot of the squeaky wheel got all the oil. We prioritized by loudness instead of importance. By having this sort of strategic plan that these are the strategic initiatives we're going to focus on as a company, made it a lot easier to prioritize, saying this thing here plays into this initiative, this thing here is cool, but it doesn't do what we're supposed to do, so we'll leave it for now. Gave us a focus. We like that. Having the right betting team, running the successful betting table requires having a good betting team. Now, it is essential that the participants understand the business as a whole. Like, what are we doing as a business? What is our point? What problems are we solving for which customers? What makes us unique compared to someone else? Let's go for that. You need to understand the customers. And you need to understand the technology. We need to understand what we're working on, what possibility, what scope, a realm of possibilities do we have to work with at all. Do we have technology that gives us an edge? Should we have technology? Does our competitors have technology that we should adopt? Participants in the betting table need to understand both the business on a strategic level, but also on a tactical level, and also technology, and understand what's going on all across the board. And this might be hard to find. We feel we've done a good job in including the various disciplines, but it's a fine line of having an effective cross-disciplinary team and having a committee. Where it's just a lot of talk and everybody has, so we have to find the right size. It took us a little bit to right size this, find the right people to be part of it, but I think we got it. The betting team will decide what are the most important things for the company to focus on for the next 2 months. So they should have some insight into that. Cooldowns are really cool. I couldn't resist the pun, sorry. I know it's pretty obvious, but I was like, yeah, this slide wrote itself. Like I said, we've seen tremendous benefits from the cooldowns. Having the opportunity to make these quality of life improvements really helps those working on the products and makes everybody happier and more productive. And you don't have this accruing guilt of technical debt. No, I wish we could do something about this. Well, we can. We'll just wait the next cooldown. We have 2 weeks to do something about it. It's amazing what you can do in 2 weeks when you're motivated to do it. There are different kinds of work. The title said it, shape up your product development. Shape up is definitively best suited for product development. It is not that suited for support work or maintenance work where the maintenance consists of small fixes, really small tasks. It is suited for when you have a product with customers and you're adding features and you're working with the product and building a product. It is not that suited for a 6-month project. It is not that suited for shorter initiatives like a marketing initiative where you have little tasks that pop up every now and again. Hey, can we get a box there? Can we get a landing page here? Can we get a thing here? It doesn't work that well. There's also different kinds of cycles. We've had an R&D cycle where we focus mostly on preliminary project work. Let's investigate problem spaces, but we still wanted those time constraints. We said, well, okay, you guys are gonna investigate this problem for 4 weeks. You folks over there, you're gonna investigate this problem you're gonna spend 6 weeks on diving into this thing, because when we do new legal products, there's a whole bunch of legal work that needs to be investigated and understood, and rules and regulations, and how this fits into things before we can even start shaping it. We've had a growth hacking cycles where we skip the shaping process and we work from a short list of short tasks that we want to implement quickly. Let's just get a bunch of things done. But we still like the time boxing. They're basically breaks from the regular cycles, but we still wanted to use the same cycle cadence to get that time pressure going and that time boxing going. Don't start and stop. When you're budgeting time, you'll be tempted to take on a task. We'll allocate 2 weeks to this thing just to see what we can get done. And then you do 2 weeks out of a 6-week sprint and a 2-week cooldown, and next cycle's, yeah, we got some stuff done. We started looking at it. Nothing really came out of it yet. Okay, let's do another 2 weeks with that. And you do 2 weeks, and then you leave it for a month. And then, we figured some out. We got some basics going. Great, let's add another 2 weeks to that. You see where this is going. It is bad. You've taken a big bet, but you're not really budgeting for enough time to complete something meaningful. And you really want something meaningful, so don't do that. It just demotivates whoever's working on. It's like, oh yeah, this thing that I looked at a month ago, and like use a lot of time to get back into that. Where was I? What's the problem space? Where's the code? What's going on? And then you have 1.5 weeks of working on, and it's like, okay, I need to drop this one because now I need to go on something else instead. Either do it or don't. Maybe take the first 2 weeks, just investigate it, but the next cycle, decide either you're doing it or you're not doing it. Don't just keep going on and off about it. All in all, for us, it's been a great success. We are more productive than I've ever been before, including all of my previous jobs, including all of the people on my team's previous jobs. They're all saying that this is the most productive I've ever been. We are delivering like crazy. It works really, really well. The code base is one of the cleanest ones I've ever worked on because we keep maintaining it, we keep pruning it, the code base, instead of pruning our backlog. The whole organization has been empowered to submit pitches. They do it. And the number of pitches people have to keep to themselves is a minimum. It stays very constant. And whenever someone suggests, I really liked it when this thing came in the channels at first time, when someone says, oh, wouldn't it be great if someone could just add a little thing in so-and-so, and then this guy showed up. Sounds like a pitch. So that's a meme at our work now. Whenever somebody, well, we could have a thing led. Sounds like a pitch. Go make one. That's what I had. Thank you so much. You can reach me on email or Twitter, or thank you, or here. I've been asked by the organizers to, because they forgot to show a video this morning, but I've been asked by the organizer, there are some bowls with paper pieces when you exit. If you could help them clean up and just take the green ones and put in the bowl as you leave, that would be great. They would appreciate that. It's not me asking, it's the organizers. Thank you. Do remember to put the green ones in the bowl as you leave the rooms. Be here all week.